name is Janet Palmer, and I'm interviewing Mr. Thomas Persons for the Veterans History Project at the Atlanta History Center. Mr. Persons, would you please state your full name and spell it for me?
Well, it's Thomas, Thomas, Burton, Burton, Persons, Persons. Now, I have another middle name, but I don't want to put it in there. That's just too much.
That's fine. That's fine. Which war did you serve in?
Huh?
Which war did you serve in?
World War II,
And which branch of the service were you in?
U.S. Navy.
What was the rank that you attained in the Navy?
The rank? Well, I was discharged as a lieutenant.
Lieutenant.
I entered as an ensign.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about your life before you went into the service, where you lived and what you were doing before you went into the service?
Well, I was born in Monticello, Georgia, and I knew when I was in high school what I wanted to be. So I was only 16 when I graduated from high school. So I had my basic architectural foundation at Auburn University, and all the professors that I had were Paris trained. And after 2 years, there was no interior design major. I would have been the only one. So I transferred to the University of Cincinnati in Ohio. And at this point in time, it has been selected the best course in the U.S. I don't know about at that point, but then. And then after that, I worked at a fabulous store in Cincinnati called H&S Pogue Interior Design, and I was there for possibly over a year, and then the University of Cincinnati was approached by Wright Kumler's, which is a beautiful store in Dayton, for someone to come there. So I just went up and was interviewed and decided I would like to move up there. So I moved to Dayton, and I was there for 3 years. And then my parents, who were not too young when I was born, decided that I should come back and live closer to home. So I came back to Georgia and went with Richards and in the interior design. And after I'd been there for a while, I told them that they needed merchandise that I could sell. So I thought they needed antiques, and they said, well, why don't you set it up? So I organized or set up their antique department, the connoisseur gallery. And then every year, they sent me to Europe on a buying trip. And Mr. Strauss, who's Mr. Rich's nephew, he was a merchandise manager. He said, of course, you can just fly over. I said, I don't fly. He says, well, there are always the queens. So every year I boarded the Queen Elizabeth in New York, Premier Classe, and sailed over to Europe and spent about 2 months in England, France, and Italy.
And I'm sorry, I didn't ask you to start with. What's your birthday?
10/29 14.
Did you join the service, or were you drafted?
Oh, no, I wasn't drafted. You see,
You're fine.
I had Auburn was a land grant college, and ROTC was required for 2 years. Well, I took the 2 years. Well, after I went to Cincinnati, I decided I would like to continue. And their thing that I could join up there was the Coast Artillery. And it was this training, you know. And so when I was ready to go to camp, they decided that with my medical exam, I had a systolic heart murmur. So they gave me an honorable discharge. Well, that dismissed that. So I stayed there, and then eventually my family wanted me to move back here. So I came to Rich's. And as I said, they didn't have the merchandise I thought they needed, so they said, well, you do what you want to. So I organized the connoisseur galleries. And then, as I told you, I went to Europe every year for 4 or 5 years, and you know, for the merchandise. And then eventually I decided I would go out on my own. So I had my own business, and I had a kind of an historic house on West Peachtree, which had been the home of Cortlandt Wynn, who was mayor in 1912, I think. And it was a cream brick house with cream trim, and I painted it Bermuda pink with white trim. And across the top facade, there were 2 windows. Of course, there was a porch, and there were the 2 windows back up here, with a large space in between. So I had my family's coat of arms carved in Italy, and had it framed and mounted all in white, and I mounted that between the 2 windows. And I was there for, I don't know how many years. And then I had a lovely client from Noonan, and when I finished her house, she was so pleased. She told me that she had a daughter in Atlanta, and her apartment suddenly needed some work. So I did the apartment. And then after the war, that young client and I decided we would get married. We married at the little church around the corner in New York and sailed over to Europe on our wedding trip, and came back and lived happily ever after, and she passed on about 11 years ago. No children, and here I am.
When did you go into the Navy?
1942.
1942. And where did you go?
Well, I was, first I went over for the Normandy invasion. After that, we had the first landing craft to hit the beach at Normandy. Our ship did. And in that landing craft was, I guess he was a colonel then, Theodore Roosevelt Jr., whom I had come to know because I delivered all the messages to him. And then he died with a heart attack, you know, after 2 or 3 weeks. And then, rather than coming back to this country, the ship went to the south of France for that invasion. And I lived in Naples for a long time, getting ready for it. And so I was in that invasion on the cruiser Augusta.
So you first went to Normandy. Do you remember much about that whole experience? Do you have any real memories of that whole experience? experience there?
Well,
What it
of
was
course,
like?
I didn't go ashore in Normandy, you see. I was on the ship, but I wasn't in the landing craft when they went ashore. But you see, I had been, at the very beginning of all this, I had been sent over to the invasion of Sicily. That was before all these other invasions, you see, and I was on Admiral Allen Goodrich Kirk's staff then. He later was ambassador to, I believe, France and Belgium.
So you were actually in Sicily
Huh?
rather than being, were you on a ship when you were there or in Sicily first?
Yeah, I was on the ship,
You were
yes,
on the
I was
ship.
on the ship.
And what were your
I was on the Ancon, which was a communication ship.
Okay. And what were your responsibilities?
Well, I was on the communication staff.
On the staff?
Yes,
And then
and I had to, had to take care of all the messages when they went out. We had coding machines, and we did them by hand, and then we had to break the messages when they came in. You see?
you had special training to do that?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
What kind of training how much training did you have to
Well, I went
be
to a
able do
communication school up in New England, Noroton, Connecticut, before I did all this.
And then after Sicily, you went to Normandy?
After Sicily, I came back to this country, and then I was in Norfolk for some time, and then I went back to Normandy, you see.
Do you know what ship you were on?
Huh?
Do you know what ship you were on when you went back to
Uh,
Normandy?
Oh, I can't remember the name of the ship. I don't recall.
That's fine.
And then after Normandy, you see, we went back down into the Mediterranean again, and I was there for the invasion of southern France.
And you
And
did
then,
the same thing?
and
with
then,
the black
yes, the
people?
same. And then after that, I came back to this country, and then I had some more Norfolk duty here, and then I went to the Pacific, and I was out there for the remainder of the war, and I ended up with the occupation of Japan, but I lived in Hawaii for about 3 or 4 months, doing duty there, and I lived in San Francisco for some time also.
In the service? When
Yeah.
you were in the service? Are
And
there-
of course, being a naval officer, and you had entree socially to most anything you wanted to do.
Are there any real stories that you remember from your experiences that that either that were particularly frightening stories or particularly funny stories that that you remember,
No,
or any people that you remember that were particularly outstanding in your mind?
no, I don't know that I do. Of course, I admired Admiral Kirk, and he was very nice to me, and but I don't recall any. I can't remember any particular officer that I came in contact with who had been, say, a movie star such before the war. But and you must remember that's a long time ago
I
to
understand.
try to bring all this up. But I did meet most interesting people. And as I say, they were all college graduates because that was the only way you could get a commission in the Navy. And
Was it frightening to be on there when you were? Do you remember how you felt when you were?
I was never frightened.
You were.
No, I never was frightened. I didn't, I don't know why, but that never occurred to me.
So you weren't really even when you were on the ship, you weren't really in any combat, or you didn't feel like you were really in.
Well, of course, I realized that, you could have been torpedoed,
Sure.
but
You never had that
I never worried about it. And usually when we went over, like going from the States over to, we went in convoy. And usually we were all in here and we had destroyers and things on the outside protecting us as we were taking all these men over there. So we had right much protection.
And you said afterwards you went over to the Pacific. You went to Hawaii first?
Yes, and then I went on over, eventually I went on over to Japan. But Japan had surrendered by then. There was no,
No
there was no.
at that
Yes,
point. So you didn't.
And I went to several islands in the Pacific, but they had already been invaded. I didn't have any invasions in the Pacific at all. It was, I had duty, but I didn't have any invasions.
So you were actually on the islands as opposed to being on the ship during that time?
Huh?
You were actually went to some of the islands, or were you on the ship when you were?
Oh, well, I was on the ship. I was never stationed on any island except the island of Hawaii, Oahu. Where Honolulu is, But I was stationed there for, I forget how many, several months. But the other islands I just touched.
What about Japan?
Well, I didn't. I just got ashore in, I guess it was Wakayama, briefly.
So you didn't actually have any duty?
No, I didn't have any. I didn't have any duty in Japan. I came on back to this country.
So, do you remember anything about? Well, I guess you weren't. This was after the bombs were dropped and everything on Japan. Was there anything that you remember about that, or I guess?
No, I didn't experience any of that. Thank goodness. Yeah.
And
my most interesting experience, of course, was those weeks or months, so to speak, in Hawaii.
what did you do there?
Well, it was just I had some contact that from before the war, and I met all these people, and they entertained us all the time, and we had a Jeep where we could, get around on the island. Of course, Oahu is a small island. It's not like the big island of Hawaii or Maui or that. It's a small island. But Honolulu is the town, or the city, I should say. And that's where, as I say, Waikiki Beach and all that is. So we had socially it was most interesting as well as military-wise.
And then after you were done in Japan, you said you came back to San Francisco?
Back to San Francisco.
And what did you do there?
Well, I had just duty, and just like I had always had. And, communications and that, until it was time to be discharged.
So how long, when were you discharged?
It would be 1945.
Okay. And then what did you do once you were discharged?
What did I do after I was discharged?
Yes.
Well, you see, before the war, after I had lived in Ohio, after graduating from school, my family wanted me to move back, so I came back south and I went with Riches. And I became in the interior design department. And then after the war, I went back, you see. And I had organized or set up their connoisseur galleries. And then they decided I should go. I told them they couldn't buy what I wanted in this country, so they sent me to Europe every year. And they wanted me to, they wanted to put on a good show for Riches, so I always went premier classe on the ship, and as I said, stayed at hotels like Claridge's in London and the Plaza Athénée and, in these different towns. And then I'd have a commissionaire, and we'd rent a car and drive through the countryside looking for antiques.
When you went back, like to France after the war, for some of these trips, how
Yeah.
were the people towards you?
How what?
How were the people acting toward the Americans? Or
Well,
did
they were, I don't know how they are, but they were acting great to me.
Were they?
Yes, I had no difficulty whatsoever. And I got to know a lot of them, you know. They were, you know, socially, and it was most pleasant. And you know, it couldn't have been nicer. And I'd go down, and then I'd take a break, maybe I'd go through Switzerland and maybe stay 2 or 3 days, and then go on down into Italy. And then, of course, at one point I lived for a little while in Naples, which was nice.
Is there anything about being in the war or in the service that you'd like to that I didn't ask you about, or that you'd like to discuss?
No, not necessarily, I don't suppose. As I told you, I had ROTC in school, but I really was more than pleased that I ended up in the Navy. But I think that was about all. I enjoyed my Navy career.
How did you pick the Navy?
Huh?
How did you pick the Navy?
Well, I just decided that's the service I'd want to be in. And then, of course, you know, back in those days, I don't know, for the dress-up uniform in the summer, we wore the whites, you know, with the high collar and everything. Yeah. I just decided that would be the branch I'd want to be in, rather than the Army.
Do you have any feelings as to how all this experience affected the rest of your life, or if it did?
Not particularly. It was just something that I passed through. It didn't have any psychological effect on me. No, because I came on back into civilian life and started going to Europe and buying and everything. And I was, you know, I had socially, I mean, being a bachelor, I had all of the social activity I wanted.
Okay. If there's nothing else you'd like to discuss about your experiences?
Well, no, I don't guess so. As I say, felt that I was most fortunate the way it all worked out.
Are you involved in any veterans activities?
No,
You weren't after the war?
no. But I decided I just wouldn't, you know, there's so many war activities since then, and so many veterans, we wouldn't be on the same frequency, I don't think. And they'd be a lot younger than I am. So that wouldn't be of any interest. And but I decided after a while it was just time to retire. You know. And say I enjoyed it while it was all going on.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Yes, fine, but I appreciate your asking me out. Thank you.